a historic breakthrough in the coronavirus pandemic. The FDA has authorized Pfizer and BioNTech's coronavirus vaccine for emergency use. Nearly 3 million doses of the first COVID-19 vaccine in the country will be shipped this weekend to more than 600 sites nationwide. Healthcare workers and residents of long-term care facilities could get the vaccine as soon as Monday. The vaccine was developed in 9 months. A second one by Moderna could receive approval next week. FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn addressed the historic milestone earlier.
We applied our high standards of review in reviewing this product so that Americans can have trust and confidence that the vaccine meets FDA's rigorous standards for safety and effectiveness. And with this authorization, we know that our federal partners are already moving to distribute the first doses of the vaccine throughout the country.
Our Tom Hansen is at one of the hospitals in New York where medical teams are anxiously awaiting their first vaccine shipment.
Well, this is our ticket out of this pandemic, I believe, and back to something normal.
That ticket Dr. Nick Gilpin of Michigan points to is Pfizer's vaccine. The company's CEO said late Friday it plans to ship the vaccine out immediately.
I couldn't be prouder of my fellow Pfizer colleagues and our partners at BioNTech. Their historic science-driven efforts have delivered a vaccine with the potential to help bring an end to the most devastating pandemic in a century.
Even before the approval was announced, Indiana Methodist Hospital staff took part in a dry run drill to effectively administer the vaccine.
For anyone that carries an EpiPen that has a history of anaphylactic reactions, that they should hold off on getting the vaccine at this time.
For people with concerns, Dr. Anthony Fauci on MSNBC was quick to dispel them.
And I will get the vaccine as soon as it is made available to me, that I will do it publicly to let the rest of the country know that I'm confident about its safety and about its efficacy.
The U.S. government has agreed to buy 100 million doses from Pfizer by March. Distribution of the vaccine will be a military-level operation, with both FedEx and UPS set to use special low-temperature refrigeration in trucks and planes to move the vaccine fast. And hospitals, including Ochsner in New Orleans, are prepared, too.
Ochsner is ready both with the ultra-cold freezers, the regular freezers, and extra refrigerators so that we can stage this across Louisiana.
The vaccine arrives as the virus surges across the country. The message remains, be safe, with Colorado's governor urging people there to still mask up.
But we have today a vaccine that's 50 to 75% effective. That's called a mask. So not, of course, as effective as the vaccine that goes in the arm, but can play a role in reducing your odds of getting it by 50%. But also, when everyone wears masks, it reduces the community transmission.
And now that the Pfizer vaccine is here and 2 others are on the way, the next phase that you're likely to see is touting the safety of the vaccines. Last night, the former head of the CDC, Dr. Richard Bessard, urged all Americans to get the shot when it's their turn. And of course, we'll eventually see former presidents Obama, Clinton, and Bush get their shots too. Lana?
Some powerful endorsements. Tom, thanks. For more on this now, I want to bring in Dr. Shereef Elnahal. He is the president and CEO of University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey, and he's also a former commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Health. Not just that, he's a member of President-elect Biden's Veterans Affairs team. Dr. Elnahal, thank you for joining us. A massive effort to get the vaccine distributed is kicking off right now. Your hospital has been practicing for this moment. Are you prepared? Do you have everything that you need?
So we have been, and it's been several weeks at least of very diligent planning, close coordination with both the state and the federal government, Operation Warp Speed. We happen to be one of the first sites in the state and also the country to get it. It's called pre-positioning. And part of that is to make sure the vaccine is ready as soon as possible, but also we are testing the complex logistics of being able to store the vaccine in ultra cold temperatures and account for every single vaccine all the way through administration, and our healthcare workers are first up.
Do you know when you're going to be receiving this vaccine? I know when I'm getting an Amazon package, I'm tracking it on FedEx or UPS. Do you have that level of information coming into you?
So it is evolving day by day. The last night's news on the emergency use authorization certainly kicks things off, and we expect it to come very soon in the coming days. And it's going to be, again, a pretty Herculean task. We have to receive safely the vaccines and securely and put them in the negative 70 degrees Celsius freezers. We also set up 4 lanes of vaccination in our medical school building attached to the hospital. This is again, high throughput, high efficiency system where we'll be able to vaccinate about 600 people per day. And that doesn't happen overnight. All of the complex planning has happened over several weeks. And again, we should be able to give our first dose to our first healthcare worker in the coming days.
It's so exciting to hear you talk about the logistics and the planning, much better than any of those Amazon packages I've been waiting for. Well, can you tell us more about how these 3 million doses are going to be distributed and allocated across the country?
Well, the first step, Lana, is to make sure that it is going to pre-positioning test sites. Because the Pfizer vaccine requires ultra-cold storage and complex packaging to be able to get it from one place to the other, you have to really test this out to make sure there are no systematic issues before it goes to the rest of the hospitals. And just to give you a sense of scale, New Jersey has about 6 hospitals getting pre-positioning and dozens more who are going to get the actual Pfizer vaccine for storage. We're not going to be only responsible for vaccinating our own healthcare workers. Because we're one of the initial hubs getting the vaccine, there's going to be a point, likely within weeks, where we're going to start vaccinating healthcare workers in the community. The doctors who have private offices, the nurse practitioners, the nurses, the physician assistants, really everybody who comes in contact with patients. And because the virus has spread so much recently in this second wave, you really have to assume any patient could possibly have COVID-19. So vaccinating our healthcare workers, and in particular also our long-term care residents, is the first priority. What we're doing is we're setting the example, we're setting the standard, we're discovering any issues that may come up. And the idea is that our model, assembly line model that we've set up in our medical school building, can be scaled to any size, including mega vaccination sites to start vaccinating hundreds of thousands of people.
The first doses, as you mentioned, are going to be given to healthcare workers and residents of long-term care facilities in just a matter of days. Everyone can agree on the necessity of the priority for those 2 groups. But who should be prioritized next? And I also want to know, are the doses that have been currently manufactured and allocated, are they sufficient to cover all of the people in these first 2 groups?
Well, here's what I would think that the ACIP, which is the committee that advises the CDC on prioritization, I think this is the direction they're going to go next. They're probably going to choose folks who are elderly, have chronic disease, and are otherwise highest risk to have bad outcomes or death with COVID-19. That's what we're all expecting. Of course, there may be other developments that come up, but that next highest risk groups after long-term care residents, again, 40% of all mortalities in the country are individuals who are residents at long-term care and nursing homes. So it's no surprise that they were first. But then there's a whole group of other folks who are particularly vulnerable to this disease that the CDC is likely to recommend next. And we're very closely following everything. And in fact, we have to plan weeks in advance to be able to identify those individuals and get them vaccinated as soon as possible. In terms of the other question you asked, we have a situation where we have about hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers across the state of New Jersey, and only a fraction of the initial allocation is going to come this coming week. And so we're not going to have enough with the first shipment to vaccinate all the healthcare workers. It's going to take at least several weeks to do that. We also have to consider adoption. And unfortunately, we're not necessarily there yet with the vast majority of healthcare workers wanting to get the vaccine. The vaccine is not going to be mandated. And so we are making sure that we're doing all of the socialization and education around the science and the data to convince even our own healthcare workers to do it first. So, of course, the number of vaccines may be a bottleneck, but also adoption. And we're planning very diligently in advance for that.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, Dr. Elnahal. We've been following and reporting extensively on the hesitancy of many of the people in the general population when it comes to this vaccine and questions that people have about it. About 40% of Americans have said that they have some questions or reservations or do not intend to take the vaccine. I've always believed that folks who are in the healthcare industry, who are seeing COVID up front and center and the devastating effects, that the adoption rate would be close to 99%. So it's very interesting to me that you're telling me that there are folks in that first group, healthcare workers, frontline workers, that have said that they don't want the vaccine. Why is that, and how rampant is that feeling among this priority group?
So we did a survey in our own hospital that asked about willingness to take the vaccine, and about 50% of our employees are willing to take it as soon as it gets here. Another 25% are concerned and a little bit skeptical, but willing to hear more. And just about 25%, the remaining, are pretty skeptical and would require a lot of convincing. And so the number one reason we found is concern over side effects and adverse events, concern about how fast the science went on this, including the clinical trials. And there are good explanations for all of those things. And so I think we're already seeing an increase in the number of people willing to take it when explaining, for example, that the clinical trials had tens of thousands of people in them, as opposed to what is normally done, which is about 2,000 to 3,000, so 10 times the number of people, and no serious adverse events and very, very rare incidents of allergic reactions. So explaining that is much easier than the second reason, which is that there's actually a sense of fatigue among healthcare workers about going first on so many things. The first people to encounter patients with COVID-19, the first people to go into the fray and put themselves in danger seeing patients every day. And so a lot of that just requires listening and counseling and providing psychosocial support. There's a lot of post-traumatic stress in healthcare workers across the country. Organizations that have been proactive in addressing that will find, I think, much quicker adoption. And thankfully, we have thought about that and done a lot about it. But all those things need to be planned for, because if our healthcare workers are refusing to take this vaccine, it's going to be much harder to convince the general public to do so.
That's why it's so interesting to hear you talking about this. One of the things that you mentioned was a concern about the side effects, the adverse effects. Pfizer's vaccine, as you know, requires a second shot 3 weeks later. I guess I have several questions for you on this front. What happens if people don't get the second shot? Does it have to be right at 3 weeks? And following on something you just said, how concerned are you about compliance, particularly as we're hearing that there are some really uncomfortable side effects?
Yes. So first of all, you have to take the second dose 21 days later for the Pfizer vaccine. And for the Moderna, it's 28 days later. We have to follow the exact protocol that was done in the clinical trials, because that's the only protocol that we know works, the only protocol that leads to 95% effectiveness, the only protocol that we know has the side effect profile that we're aware of. In fact, you're not considered vaccinated if you get one vaccine and don't get the next. And all of the risks, including the side effects that you may experience a day or two later, will be all for naught unless you take that second vaccine. In terms of the side effects, they are common, but they're not severe. And so just to give you an example, fever is actually less than 50% of folks who get the vaccine. If it does happen, it's very often very mild. Local pain at the injection site, fatigue, muscle aches. Interestingly, very similar side effects to the flu vaccine. And we know that so many folks in America take the flu vaccine. They may deal with a day or two of side effects, but it's much better than getting the flu. In terms of the risk profile of getting the vaccine versus getting COVID-19, in this case, it is a much bigger risk to get COVID-19. And we know that the risk is going up every day as the second wave is proceeding. So as we are giving these explanations to our healthcare workers and doing town halls with the community, we just did one with Mayor Baraka here in Newark, we are seeing more and more people interested in this, which makes me optimistic.
Dr. Shereef Elnahal, I have so many more questions for you, but my team is warning me that we have to move on if we're going to cover the rest of the news. I do want to have you back on to talk about the VA and a question I have about whether veterans should get some special priority. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.